the success of the neoliberal critique by the 1980s and 90s was the withdrawal of the state from all of these areas where earlier the state was present. So there is, as I suggest, a tactical withdrawal of the state, and then a resort to what were called extension of benefits only to targeted population that were deemed to require special benefits. So yes, if there were people who were unemployed, they would require assistance. If there were actually specific groups that required specific forms of assistance, including, for instance, what was called the negative tax, right? That's to say subsidies of different kinds, maybe even for things like food or housing and so on, but not as universal rights, but specifically. And so what you get, as I discussed this, is the distinction between rights and interests. And in fact, a creation of a distinction between individuals as citizens, citizens having rights, and individuals as having interests and belonging, therefore, to specific groups with interests, with specific interests. What this does politically is, of course, break up the consolidations of large mass formations, because, in fact, the state operates only in relation to demands of very specific groups, okay, which, as we all know, Foucault famously described as governmentality, right? So those become the new administrative techniques by which society is managed and demands are managed. What this leads to politically, and this is in relation to the question of popular participation, is an enormous apathy towards political participation, voting, and so on. So this was widely seen in the 1990s and 2000s, because on the one side, you had an enormous reliance on experts and on certain disciplines of public policy. So which particular kinds of policies to be adopted in relation, let us say, to the economy, or in relation to health, or in relation to education, and so on, there was a wide consensus of opinion among all major parties, so that there was very little difference between this party or that party, and very little to choose, because in a sense, everything was driven by a certain consensus that emerged in specific policy disciplines among experts. Leading, therefore, to the idea of the people as losing interest in political participation, because in a sense, there was very little to choose. So this apathy is something that is marked in the Western democracies by the early 2000s.